And oops. Okay, there go please. Oh yes, there's also tea and coffee. Just let me know who still wants coffee right here. We'll get it sent.
So hello. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate Ben, Eugene, and RSIS kindly host this wonderful workshop, and I really appreciate each one of you come here today because I know that this is a really packed week for Singaporeans, and so I'm very excited to share what's happening in Japan and also to think about how Japan and also Singapore can collaborate more on cybersecurity. So here is what I'd like to discuss today. So I'm not so sure. So I know that some of you speak Japanese, but I'm not so sure how much you already know about Japanese cybersecurity. So you just came back from Japan, so probably you know more about Japanese cybersecurity. But in most of the cases, Japanese cybersecurity related documents are only available in Japanese, not so much available in English. So I thought that thank you so much. I thought it's more beneficial for you to get some background knowledge about Japanese cybersecurity history and also like what kind of wake up calls Japanese have been facing and how Japanese are struggling and also trying to overcome challenges and to obtain more opportunities, including international collaboration. So here's some background and also wake-up calls to Japanese cybersecurity. So back in 2011, it was the first time for Japanese media to start reporting about cyber attacks. It was back in Mitsubishi Heavy Industries was breached probably by Chinese hackers. And because Mitsubishi Heavy Industry is one of the biggest Japanese defense contractors, and it was one of the major Japanese newspapers called Yomiuri Shimbun, people started to get more interested in cybersecurity because people now first learn about the word cybersecurity or cyber attacks almost on a daily basis. But still, it doesn't necessarily mean that people got it. People are like, okay, well, it kind of makes sense because Mitsubishi Heavy Industries is one of the biggest companies in Japan and they have defense contracts, so they must have tons of secrets. So hackers will be after them, but not us because we are not defense contractors. We don't work with the Japanese government so much, so we are safe. But Japanese companies had to change their mindset in a couple years later when, do you remember what happened in March 2013? It was when, do you remember that? So several South Korean TV broadcasters and also banks were hacked. So there are massive coordinated cyber attacks from North Korea. So North Koreans were able to wipe off the database from TV broadcasters and banks. So Japanese people watching TV programs every day, seeing that South Koreans were not able to withdraw their money from ATMs, and the TV broadcasters are running around to use their personal laptop or mobile phones to try to keep doing the live broadcasting. And now Japanese understand, okay, so cyber attacks are not just about the government or defense contractors. It can actually impact our daily lives. Maybe we don't have the access to ATMs. It's real problem. So it was so back in 2013, I was working for Hitachi Systems, and I noticed that we started to receive lots of inquiries from other Japanese companies. Like, hey, so is this kind of problems can happen to us? And 6 months later, September 2013, Tokyo was selected to host the 2020 Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games. And this is a big deal for any country, but also, of course, for Japanese government and industry, because this is not just about sports event, because it's very exciting. You're gonna cheer your favorite teams and your country team, but it's also about the platforms to show your innovations to the rest of the world. And a lot of VIPs come from Singapore, United States, Canada, Australia, everywhere, and then the reporters from everywhere to report a few months what's going on in Japan. So it's a great opportunity for the Japanese, but also that there's huge pressure for the Japanese government and industries to enhance not just the physical security to counter terrorism, but also for potential cyber attacks. And then another wake up call. So in May 2017, WannaCry. And so fortunately, Japanese companies were not hit as hard as other European companies, but still several major Japanese companies, including Honda and Hitachi, got hit. And the reason why Hitachi was not able to access their business emails for a couple of days is because the first infection started in electronic microscope in one of their branches in Germany. And nobody would expect that your electronic microscope will be connected to the internet. And now people realize, okay, so even this tiny electronic microscope can be connected to the internet, and it can also impact your business operations. And can you imagine that you can access your business emails for a couple of days? Can you survive? Are you sure that your partners and customers will be happy about it? Maybe not. Definitely not. So that's why this also gave a huge wake-up call to Japanese companies. So, okay, so given how globalized our business operations are, we have to make sure that we have to bring that good IoT security and also micro-segmentations to at least control the expansion of potential infection. So, so I talked about several wake-up calls to the Japanese cybersecurity. And if you take a look at these milestones of the birth of Japanese CSIRT or Computer Security Incident Response Team, you can see that after 2011, the number of CSIRTs in Japan and also registered CSIRTs for the Nippon CSIRT, Nippon means Japan, CSIRT Association have been going up. And then after each milestone, each wake-up call, Japanese government issued new guidelines or regulations, and also it pushes up the number of Japanese CSIRTs. And it also helped the Japanese companies to create ISACs, or Information Security and Analysis Centers. So one of the oldest one is telecommunications, which I belong to, but also finance is one of the most active ones, working with American FS ISAC. And even though, so in the United States, ISACs are now connected to each sector of critical infrastructure sectors. But in Japan, even though that manufacturers are not considered or defined as part of critical infrastructure, and the Japanese manufacturers are so prevalent in the global market, so they decided to launch their own version of old ISAC 2 years ago, and they are also closely working with American old ISAC in the United States. And also the software ISAC are there, and electricity ISACs now working closely with their European and American counterparts. So I already talked about the huge impact given by the WannaCry back in 2017, because the Japanese companies have been globalizing their operations. But the reason why the Japanese companies are focusing more on globalization is because the aging society and shrinking populations. So Singapore and Japan faces the same problem. We have a decreasing birth ratio and aging society. So what do? We have to look for, of course, we have to make sure that what to do with our population. But at the same time, we have to find alternative markets. And so that's why the Japanese companies started to invest more in merger and acquisitions outside Japan. So you can see that the amount of budget for merger and acquisition has been going up over the last few years. So this is very exciting because now you have a new family members outside Japan. So you're welcome. Then please come to the new family. But also really complicates your governance, especially cybersecurity governance. But because you've been using totally different IT systems and cybersecurity appetite, so you can see that how this globalization trends have been complicating Japanese cybersecurity. So you can see that. Um, so this question: so does your headquarters know about cybersecurity status at their branches outside Japan? You can see that these Japanese companies are aware of what's happening in terms of cybersecurity outside Japan compared to American and European companies. So we are struggling to make sure to have a good cybersecurity governance overseas. And the good news is that the Japanese government has been really active on the IoT security. And one of the most successful stories in the Japanese IoT security is called Cyber Clean Center, started 13 years ago. So 13 years ago, the threat landscape was totally different because we didn't have so many smaller devices. We didn't have microwaves or fridge or connected to the internet. So it was much simpler. So that's why the Japanese government only focus on computers and servers connected to the internet. And this project, Cyber Clean Center, lasted for 5 years. And it significantly dropped the number of botnets connected to the infected Japanese computers and servers. So that's why that the US government, like DHS, has been looking up the Japanese IoT security strategies to how to do it. But now the threat landscape totally changed because we have now smaller devices, smart fridges, smart microwaves, smart bulbs. So that's why the Japanese government decided, okay, so we had a good success story, but we have to now focus on the different levels on IoT security. So that's why the Japanese government started a notice project this year. And you might have seen headlines from Reuters and CNN and also ZDNet that the Japanese government started to hack IoT devices. And hacking is a little bit too strong words to use because, of course, because checking IoT devices, if they still keep using default passwords or easy to guess passwords like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 or password, that kind of stuff, it also raises privacy concerns from ordinary people. So that's why the Japanese government to modify the law to allow the government to do this. So this is kind of similar to policemen walking around and monitoring your community to make sure that, okay, so this window is not broken. Oh, but wait a second, this back door is broken. So is this something wrong with this house? And then you have to notify the owner of the house to make sure that everything is okay. So this is similar to the notice project. So this is only to make sure that they are not using the default password or easy to guess passwords. And the Japanese government already has the list of the easy to guess passwords. And then they also notify them what kind of IP address they're going to use to do this, so that you can know that, oh, this scanning is from the government, not from random people. Sure.
So this is done by police or cybersecurity. Which agency?
So Japanese Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications.
And they're given the powers to do this.
I'm sorry.
They're given the powers to do this.
So they have to change the law to do this.
They've already changed the law.
Yes. So this project already started.
How fast are you?
So it's gonna be another 5-year project. And as of June 2019, the government was able to scan the half of the IP addresses connected to the web cameras, sensors, and routers connected to the open internet. But if it's only the internal network, then they will not do that because it's going to be really invading privacy.
Sorry, it's very interesting. This is for all private sector or industry, individual residential servers, IoT project or objects, IoT. If I'm a visitor, I'm a foreigner, source, I got a handphone. Am I subjected to that?
I don't
cover this. The law only cover
only the Japanese devices.
in reality you won't know.
Yeah, it's difficult.
I'm there, I have a laptop, yes, then how does the law affect privacy for people visiting? If a business man doing that, because it's just an IoT, there's I'm a foreign IoT, I'm a local IoT. How do you say that?
I don't know the answer. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm asking. So we're entity.
So for this project, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications are working with National Institute of Communications and Technology, and also working with ICT ISAC, because ICT ISAC has members from telecommunication companies, so ISPs can contact the owner of vulnerable IoT devices to let them know that they change their passwords. So it's a collaboration between the Japanese government and also the Japanese industry to do this. But to do a better cybersecurity, you have to also get business executives involved, because how much we are dependent on IT and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not just about the technical problems, but it's also a business management programs. So that's why you have to get understanding from Japanese business leaders. But the problem is that Japanese people tend to think that narrowly define that cybersecurity is only IT problem rather than human beings problem. So another interesting statistics. So asking, do you do risk assessment covering cybersecurity or information security? Less Japanese companies do such risk assessment compared to American and European companies. So it makes me a little bit worried. Just a little bit, not that much. And of course, Japanese government and some Japanese companies are aware of this program. So what we do? So Japanese government launched a cybersecurity guidelines for business leadership 4 years ago to say that also cybersecurity is a business risk management program, and you have to change your mindset. Cybersecurity is not just a cost center. You have to invest in cybersecurity to make sure you can protect your innovations and your business operations. But to do this, you have to have a good manpower and good cybersecurity talents, and it is a global problem, not just Japanese, but also Singaporeans and other countries as well. But to talk about it, I have to mention the uniqueness of Japanese cybersecurity career path. So when the Japanese companies or any companies around the world started to adopt ITs back in 1990s, and it coincided the collapse of Japanese bubble economy. So suddenly Japanese growing economy went down, and Japanese companies didn't have much money to spend on this cool thing called IT. So Japanese company decided, okay, so we didn't have time, so we should still use IT. It looks so cool, and so it seems like they are helping us to cut costs. But we didn't have the money to do that, so we should outsource IT work to system integrators or vendors so that we don't have to have an in-house team. It's still that trend still continues till today. So that's why you see that most of IT professionals in Japan are working for vendors or system integrators, and the ratio is almost opposite compared to other developed countries, including Americans and Canadians and the Germans and the French. And this also impacted the Japanese allocation of cybersecurity professionals. So unfortunately, there is no statistics available for Japanese cybersecurity professionals. But I think that most of Japanese cybersecurity professionals work in vendors and system integrators, not in-house. So usually, even major Japanese companies don't have a big cyber in-house cybersecurity team compared to Americans. And career paths are totally different because you lived in Japan. Probably you know that the Japanese career path is a bit different from other countries. So things have started to change, especially in tech field, including IT and cybersecurity. But still, major Japanese companies are focusing on lifetime employment. And under the lifetime employment, and after you graduate from college or graduate schools, you will spend almost 4 decades in the same organization. So you move around within the same organization, and you will go to different departments. So it is a great way to learn about your own organization and have a very holistic way, and you have a very good network with different parts of your organizations. But it also makes it so challenging for employees to accumulate your knowledge, especially cybersecurity or IT, because you will move around every 2 to 3 years. And this also impacts the role of Japanese CISOs. So I understand that the CISOs are very new to other C-suites. So it was born in the United States, Citibank, in late 1990s. So we have less than 20, we have almost 20 years. And we are still developing what CISO means. And each company, each organization has a different definition. But still, the uniqueness of Japanese CISO is that they usually have collateral duties. What I mean by that is that Japanese CISOs usually wear the hat of CIO, Chief Digitization Officer, Chief Risk Officer, so 3 or 4 hats. So it means that you probably have less time to focus on cybersecurity, and he or she doesn't necessarily have cybersecurity or IT background. So it's really difficult to put your head around what cybersecurity is. So even though that it's even challenging for professional cybersecurity professionals spending 10 years or 20 years on cybersecurity to keep up, catching up with a fast developing cybersecurity and threat landscape, it is even more difficult for Japanese CISOs to keep up with the cybersecurity challenges. So Japanese, it means that the Japanese companies have unique challenges to tackle with cybersecurity. And that is why the Japanese companies started to launch their own version of a capacity building, because we realize that if we can learn lessons from different countries to develop cybersecurity professionals, but we also have a different definition, different expectation, because we have different percentage of allocation between the IT professionals and cybersecurity professionals, between the vendors and the end user companies. So 4 years ago, NTT, NEC, Hitachi, three of the major Japanese companies launched the Japanese cross-sector forum to form good ecosystems to educate, hire, train, and retain good cybersecurity professionals in collaboration with the government and also academia. And because it was now 4 years ago, and it was when that the Japanese government translated the NIST cybersecurity framework from English to Japanese. The cross-sector forum decided to use the NIST cybersecurity framework as a common language. Why? Because now the Japanese cross-sector forum has 44 members from all of the 14 critical infrastructure sectors. And because you're working with your own critical infrastructure companies, you know that each sector has totally different expectation and different culture and different language about cybersecurity and IT and OT. So unless you have the specific definition, similar expectation, align the expectation, it's impossible to talk about cybersecurity programs and how to even. So what do you mean by cybersecurity professionals? Are you talking about CISO? Are you talking about help desk? Are you talking about database management? So each of them has a different, really important missions to fulfill, but they need to have a different skill set. So that's why they decided to use the NIST cybersecurity framework and also NICE framework to define what cybersecurity professionals means, what kind of job description they should have, and what kind of knowledge they should have, and how deep knowledge they should have in each category. And they also define what kind of cybersecurity missions each of the job types are required to fulfill. Uh, so this is from the NIST Cybersecurity Risk Management Conference 1 year ago in Baltimore. So he's my colleague, and he's from NEC, and he's from Hitachi, and they talked about how they define the cybersecurity professionals and cybersecurity missions using the NIST framework. And as I said, because Japanese companies still use the lifetime employment system, and they rotate people every 2 to 3 years, and so even though that you are assigned to cybersecurity team tomorrow, you don't necessarily have cybersecurity background. So you're like, oh, do I have to do cybersecurity now, starting from tomorrow? Then so that's why they developed a calendar. So Japanese fiscal year starts in April and ends in March. So well, cyber attacks can happen anytime, so you cannot control that. It's up to them. But still, you have to do your budget request. Like you have to do audit in certain cycle. So they all mapped out now which job types have to do their mission in which month in the calendar, so that even though that you are fast comer cybersecurity professional, you can still know what you are expected to do to help cybersecurity professionals unique to Japanese career path. And so for the protection of critical infrastructure, there are two major legislations you should remember. One is the Basic Act on Disaster Management. So this is not about cyber attacks. This can be natural disasters like typhoons and flooding. And another act is Basic Act on Cybersecurity. And if you are critical infrastructure companies, you will be defined as a lifeline company under the Basic Act on Disaster Management. So this law will require you, because you are a critical infrastructure company, you have to have a resiliency even natural disaster happens. And you have to make sure, and you have to do your utmost efforts to provide sustainable and 24/7 services to your customers. And the Basic Act on Cybersecurity also requires to have a good cybersecurity resiliency, and you also have to report to your stewardship agency or ministry if any cyber attack disrupts your services to your customer. So, for example, NTT. So NTT has telecommunication services to, and the telecommunication services can be disrupted by cyber attacks, but also can happen by system failures and also natural disasters. And Japan is prone to so many types of natural disasters. You have to monitor 24/7. So that's why the NTT has several network operation centers all over Japan to monitor any anomaly in our communication and network. And also because power outage can happen by these three types of risks. We have extra batteries, and you have to locate our critical facility in the right location so that they will not be impacted by flooding or typhoons. And if unfortunately any service disruption happens, it is difficult to identify the cause from the beginning. So that's why NTT always make sure to have NOCs, network operation centers, cybersecurity team, disaster management teams, and CERT closely work together to identify the cause first. And if you once we find out the cause, then the relevant team will work on that to fix the problem. And to do that, we also have to have regular exercises, not just cyber exercises, but also about disaster recovery exercises. And the Japanese government has been really active on doing joint cyber exercises. So the NIST, National Information Security Center, so it's something equivalent to Singaporean CSA, has been doing joint cyber exercise with relevant ministry and agencies, and also companies from all over the 14. Recently became 14, but until last year it was only 13 critical infrastructure sectors. They've been doing joint exercises. And the last one happened in December 2018, and it had over 3,000 cybersecurity professionals from all the 14 critical infrastructure sectors, and also Japanese government. And they tested cyber attacks on electricity, and they also worked with transportation sectors, and they also managed disinformation campaign through the social media. So they have to come up with a new scenario monitoring what's happening in the news. And interdependency is also a very important topic for the protection of critical infrastructure, because interdependency is quite important among between telecommunication, energy, electricity, and also transportation. So NTT has regular exercises with municipal governments to test risk management capabilities, also with self-defense forces. Oh, uh, he's my manager. Yeah. So this is This picture was taken the last joint cyber exercise in December 2018, and he was talking to Japanese Olympic minister about what's happening in this room. We can see that this was quite a big room. So what's next? So you can see that Japan has a unique cybersecurity culture and unique cybersecurity career path, but we also faces the same challenges: critical infrastructure protection, capacity building, and IoT security. And I think that the Japanese, so I've been working on cybersecurity over the last several years, and especially after the Tokyo was selected to host the Tokyo 2020, I've seen that the Japanese companies and Japanese government got really excited about cybersecurity, and I know that it's not perfect, but I'm so proud that the Japanese companies and the government started to take extra steps to do some exciting projects like notice and also the cross-sector forum. So that so NTT has very unique teams that are out-facing to share what's happening in Japan and what NTT is doing in terms of cybersecurity. So we are here to share. So I know that this is not perfect on everything about cybersecurity, but I'm really willing to share, but also to learn from you to deepen Japan and Singapore cybersecurity collaboration. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So you wanna?